From a senator getting beaten nearly to death on the Senate floor, to a fistfight that broke out mid-vote, to a congressman who showed up to cast the deciding vote while literally dying. These are the most insane moments in U.S. Congress that your history teacher definitely skipped. And spoiler, while some of these end with justice, others end with the guy who threw the punch getting a standing ovation. But first, let's go back to 1798, just 9 years after the Constitution was signed. The ink was barely dry, the country was brand new, and two congressmen got into a fistfight on the House floor. Vermont Representative Matthew Lyon and Connecticut Representative Roger Griswold had been going at each other for weeks. Griswold called Lyon a coward. Lyon responded the only way a founding-era politician knew how. He spit in Griswold's face, right there, in Congress, in front of everyone. The House tried to expel Lyon, failed to get enough votes, and Griswold decided to handle it himself. He walked up to Lyon with a wooden cane and started beating him. Lyon grabbed a pair of fireplace tongs and fought back. Two grown men, elected representatives of the United States of America, brawling in the Capitol with fireplace equipment. Nobody got expelled. Both kept their seats. Democracy is beautiful. But if you think that's unhinged, the 1830s made the Lyon-Griswold fight look like a polite disagreement. Because Congress in the 1800s wasn't just chaotic, it was armed. Members routinely showed up to sessions carrying knives and pistols. There were documented reports of congressmen drawing weapons mid-debate, not threatening to draw them, actually drawing them, on the floor of Congress. And here's the wildest part. Nobody thought this was that weird. It was just Tuesday. The rules of the House technically banned dueling, but the rules of the House also couldn't stop a man with a Bowie knife and a grudge. At one point, tensions got so bad that the House Sergeant-at-Arms had to physically stand between members to prevent outright violence. The United States government, ladies and gentlemen. And then there's the moment that made the whole country stop cold. May 22nd, 1856. Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts had just delivered a brutal 2-day speech on the Senate floor called The Crime Against Kansas. He tore into pro-slavery senators by name. He mocked them. He was vicious. One of the men he targeted was Senator Andrew Butler of South Carolina. Butler wasn't there to hear it, but his cousin was. Representative Preston Brooks of South Carolina sat in the Senate gallery listening to every word. And 2 days later, he walked onto the Senate floor, after most members had left, found Sumner sitting at his desk, and beat him unconscious with a metal-tipped gutta-percha cane. Over and over. Sumner tried to stand up and ripped his desk from the floor, trying to get away. By the time it was over, he was covered in blood. Brooks had to be physically pulled off him. Sumner's injuries were so severe he couldn't return to the Senate for 3 years. His empty desk was left vacant on purpose, as a symbol. Meanwhile, in the South, Brooks became a hero. Southern admirers sent him commemorative canes with inscriptions like "Hit him again." The House tried to expel him. They didn't have enough votes. Brooks resigned anyway, went home to South Carolina, and was immediately re-elected by an overwhelming majority. The country was 5 years away from tearing itself apart, and you could feel exactly why. Now, most insane congressional moments involve rage, but this next one involves something almost more alarming: pure weaponized stubbornness. Meet Senator Huey Long of Louisiana, nicknamed the Kingfish, a man who turned the filibuster into performance art. In 1935, Long launched one of the longest solo filibusters in Senate history, over 15 hours, to block a bill he hated. But Huey wasn't just standing there droning on about policy. He read Shakespeare. He recited recipes for Louisiana pot liquor and fried oysters. He gave a full lesson on how to properly fry catfish. He explained the rules of poker. At one point, he read the entire Constitution out loud. Not because it was relevant, but because he needed to fill time and he figured, hey, it's the Senate, someone should probably read this thing. Meanwhile, Senators were literally sleeping in the chamber, staffers were running in shifts, and the whole apparatus of the United States government ground to a halt because one man from Louisiana wanted to talk about his mama's cornbread recipe. He eventually had to stop, not because anyone beat him, but because he needed to use the bathroom. The bill passed the moment he sat down. He lost. But everybody remembered the catfish. But while Huey Long was losing battles with his bladder, other members of Congress were fighting battles far more serious. Because sometimes the most insane thing about Congress isn't what people do in it. It's what they do to get there and stay there. In 1838, a sitting congressman named Jonathan Silly of Maine was killed in a duel with another congressman. A duel between two elected members of Congress over an accusation made in a newspaper article that Silly had allegedly made an unfavorable comment about a newspaper editor. The duel wasn't even technically between the two people who had the dispute. It was a proxy situation that escalated through seconds and letters until both men were standing in a field in Maryland firing rifles at each other. On the third exchange of fire, Silly was shot and killed. His opponent, William Graves of Kentucky, technically wasn't expelled. He just quietly didn't seek re-election. Congress passed an anti-dueling law for Washington, D.C. shortly after. It did not stop dueling. Now here's where it gets medically insane. The year is 1890. The Senate is deadlocked on a major piece of legislation, and the vote is going to be razor thin. Senator Thomas Nast, actually, let's be precise here, multiple instances across Senate history feature the same plot. A senator or representative who is gravely ill, sometimes dying, being physically carried into the chamber to cast a deciding vote. One of the most dramatic involves senator pairs in the late 1800s, where members on their deathbeds were brought in on stretchers and in wheelchairs to break ties. Doctors on call, family members standing by. The man can barely lift his hand, but he raises it anyway because the vote cannot wait and no one else can replace him. And then he's wheeled back out and sometimes doesn't survive the week. The legislation passes by one vote. That's the margin. One half-dead senator in a wheelchair. That's American democracy functioning exactly as designed. And if you want a more recent example of Congress going completely off the rails, look no further than 1983, when a full brawl nearly broke out during a committee hearing. Tensions between members had been building for weeks over an energy bill. Voices were raised, then chairs. A congressman had to be physically restrained by staffers. No punches technically landed, but every person in that room knew exactly how close it got. The footage exists. People have seen it. Congress issued a statement. Nothing happened. But none of that, not the canes, not the duels, not the catfish recipes, none of it compares to what happened on January 6th, 1941. Wait, wrong January 6th. Let's go back even further, to the most procedurally insane day in congressional history, the counting of the 1876 electoral votes. The presidential election between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden was so disputed that Congress literally had to invent a brand new institution on the fly to resolve it. They created the Electoral Commission, 15 men, 5 senators, 5 representatives, 5 Supreme Court justices, to decide who won. The commission voted 8-7 along party lines for Hayes every single time, on every single disputed state. Tilden had actually won the popular vote. The whole thing was resolved in a backroom deal now called the Compromise of 1877, where Hayes got the presidency in exchange for pulling federal troops out of the South, effectively ending Reconstruction and abandoning Black Americans to the Jim Crow era. A presidential election resolved by a made-up committee in a secret deal. The loser won more votes. The winner never campaigned for the deal that gave him the job. Congress invented and dissolved an entire branch of government in about 4 months. All perfectly legal. Mostly. And then there's the man who might be the single most stubborn human being to ever set foot in the Capitol. Carl Vinson of Georgia served in the House of Representatives for 50 years, 5 decades. He was elected in 1914 and didn't leave until 1965. He served under 8 presidents. He was there for World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Civil Rights Movement. He was offered a cabinet position by JFK and turned it down because he said he had more power in Congress than in any cabinet. He was probably right. When he finally retired at 81 years old, Lyndon Johnson awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His response was essentially, "Okay, thanks, I've seen everything." And he had. But if longevity is wild, this is wilder. In 2020, during one of the most contentious congressional sessions in recent memory, the House of Representatives voted on legislation while members were visibly sick, some in masks, some not, some who had tested positive and showed up anyway because the margin was too tight to miss. Doctors were on standby. Members were kept in separate holding rooms and brought in one at a time to vote. It looked less like a legislature and more like a very poorly organized game show where the prize was federal law. And somehow the vote went through, because it always does. Because here's the thing about Congress. It's been beaten, dueled, filibustered, brawled in, and dragged to the edge of collapse more times than anyone wants to admit. And every single time, someone wheeled in half dead, or stood up for 15 hours talking about cornbread, or showed up still bleeding, and cast their vote. Not because the system is perfect, clearly it is not, but because the alternative, not showing up, was somehow always worse. And if you think these moments are crazy, wait until you find out how the men behind some of these votes actually died, because one of them was beaten with a cane, one was shot in a field in Maryland, and yeah, a few of them made it to 100.
And subscribe for more videos like this one.